A racist passenger tells black twins to get lost mid-flight. Seconds later, their father, a pilot, shows up and everything changes. If you believe no black child should ever be told they don't belong, subscribe now and take a stand. The soft hum of the aircraft cabin, the scent of fresh leather seats, and the distant clink of glassware welcomed Marcus and Malik as they stepped into first class. 12 years old and identical down to the curve of their dimples, the twins clutched their boarding passes with a mix of pride and nervousness. It was the first time they had ever flown without a parent seated next to them. But they weren't alone entirely, not really. Their father, a respected commercial pilot, had walked them to the gate in full uniform, his captain's hat tucked neatly under one arm, his voice calm but filled with pride as he gave last-minute instructions. "Remember what I told you," he had said, kneeling in front of them and adjusting the strap on Marcus's backpack. "If anything goes wrong, give the letter to the lead attendant. No questions. Just hand it over. And don't worry, I'll see you at the other end. I'll be landing the same plane." Both boys had nodded, trying to appear braver than they felt. Now, as they slipped into the plush seats of 2A and 2B, they looked around wide-eyed. The seats were massive, more like thrones than chairs. Silver buttons gleamed from armrests, and a neatly folded blanket waited on each seat. Flight attendants in navy and gold uniforms moved swiftly up and down the aisle, prepping for takeoff. Laughter and soft conversation drifted from other passengers, but the boys were quiet, absorbing it all like wide-eyed tourists at a royal banquet. Malik leaned over, whispering, "This doesn't even feel like a plane. It's like a hotel room in the sky." Marcus gave a small smile. "Dad said first class was different. I just didn't think it'd be this different." They were just beginning to settle in, Malik pulling out a book, Marcus adjusting the screen in front of him, when a shadow blocked the aisle. A tall, middle-aged man in a sleek navy blue business suit stood staring at them. His sharp jaw clenched, and the corners of his mouth curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. "You boys lost?" he asked, voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. His eyes scanned them like they were stains on a white tablecloth. "This is first class." Marcus looked up, startled. "No, sir, these are our seats." "Oh, I don't think so," the man said, leaning in closer. His cologne, something strong and peppery, invaded their space. "You don't belong here. This isn't coach. This is for people who earned it." Malik's fingers tightened around the armrest. The seats around them still buzzed with pre-flight energy, and no one had caught on yet. Marcus tried to keep his voice calm, polite, his father always told them, dignity over drama. "Our dad booked these seats for us," Marcus said softly, careful with his tone. "Of course he did," the man replied with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Let me guess, he saved up for a special treat? Must be nice when just anyone can buy their way in now." The man straightened, then said loud enough for several rows to hear, "Kids these days. No manners, no class, just handed everything." One man a few rows back glanced over, his brows furrowing, but he quickly returned to his newspaper. A woman across the aisle shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. The flight attendants continued preparing for takeoff, rolling carts and checking seatbelts, unaware of the tension brewing. "Maybe your daddy should have bought you coach seats," the man added. "Better yet, maybe you should have stayed home where you belong." Malik looked away, swallowing hard. His chest felt tight. Marcus reached for his brother's hand under the armrest, squeezing it gently, then slowly pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. It was smooth, thick paper, sealed and embossed with the airline's logo in gold. Their father had given it to Marcus just before boarding, his face serious. "Only if there's a problem," he had said. Marcus held the envelope for a second, then stood up and looked toward the front of the cabin. A flight attendant was finally walking back toward them, smiling warmly as she passed out menus. He stepped into the aisle, lifted the envelope with two hands, and quietly said, "Excuse me, miss. My father told me to give this to you if anything bad happened." The woman, tall and professional, looked surprised, but accepted the envelope without hesitation. As she read, her face changed. Her smile faded. Her eyes flicked from the paper to the boys, then slowly turned toward the man still standing smugly nearby. "Excuse me, sir," she said in a firm but quiet voice. "Please return to your seat. I'll be right back." Without waiting for a response, she disappeared toward the front of the aircraft. Moments later, there was a soft chime overhead. Then, the captain's voice echoed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the delay. We've been informed of a necessary crew reassignment and will be holding briefly while the front door is reopened. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Passengers looked around, puzzled. Reassignment? Reopening the door now? They were nearly cleared for takeoff. The engines had begun to hum, the lights had dimmed, and all signs pointed to an on-time departure. The man in the suit turned around in confusion. "What kind of circus is this?" he muttered. Marcus and Malik didn't move. They didn't need to. Their father had taught them to sit still in the storm and wait for the sky to clear. Marcus looked out the window. Malik stared straight ahead. Their silence was stronger than any words they could have spoken. 10 feet away, the man who had mocked them began to shift in his seat, his earlier smugness turning to suspicion. He glanced toward the front again, but the door had not yet reopened. Whispers started traveling through the cabin. "What's going on? Crew reassignment? Did someone get sick?" And then it happened. With a soft mechanical hiss, the cabin door unlocked and opened once more. Marcus smiled faintly. He knew exactly who would walk through. Only people who protect black families from hate hit that subscribe button. Are you with us? The cabin door hissed as it reopened, cutting through the growing hum of confusion and tension. Heads turned. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The first thing everyone noticed was the towering figure in the doorway. He stepped onto the plane with steady, deliberate steps, tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a pristine pilot uniform that seemed to carry more weight than any authority badge. The golden wings on his chest glinted under the cabin lights, but it was the calm steel in his eyes that truly commanded attention. For a moment, the entire aircraft seemed to hold its breath. The lead flight attendant stepped forward quickly, eyes widening when she saw him. "Captain Coleman," she said, voice quiet but reverent. "You're early." "I'll be taking over this flight," Captain Darius Coleman replied, his voice smooth but edged with command. "We're initiating immediate passenger re-verification. Prepare the manifest." Whispers erupted like sparks across the cabin. No one quite understood what was happening, but everyone felt that something important had just shifted. In first class, the suited man who had harassed Marcus and Malik sat frozen in disbelief. His expression twisted from annoyance to confusion, and finally to recognition. His eyes widened slightly as he made the connection. This wasn't just another pilot. This was their father. The same man he had ignored at the gate. The same man he had assumed was an airport worker, or, at best, a low-ranking pilot. Now, he was in charge of the entire aircraft. "You've got to be joking," the man muttered under his breath, loud enough for those nearby to hear. He chuckled dryly, as if trying to dismiss the reality in front of him. "This is a stunt, right?" Captain Coleman didn't so much as glance his way. Instead, he walked toward the two boys seated quietly, their backs straight, eyes locked on their father with a mix of relief and awe. He crouched slightly beside them, blocking the rest of the world for just a moment. "Marcus, Malik, you okay?" he asked, voice softer now, fatherly, grounding. Malik nodded quickly. Marcus hesitated, then whispered, "He told us we didn't belong here." Coleman's jaw tightened. His hand gently tapped Marcus's shoulder. "You belong wherever you sit. Never forget that." He stood and turned back to the lead flight attendant. "Do we have the incident report?" His voice returned to full command. She handed over a printed sheet, her hands slightly trembling. "We completed it during pre-flight checks. The other attendants confirmed what they heard." "Good," the captain said. Then, without raising his voice, he turned to face the man in the suit and took a few deliberate steps toward him. The rest of the passengers followed his every move, breathless and silent, watching the way the pilot's mere presence shifted the air in the cabin. "Sir," Darius began, his tone formal, clear, and unshakably firm. "Under FAA Regulation 121.585 and airline policy, verbal harassment of passengers, especially minors, is grounds for removal. You've not only disrupted the peace in this cabin, but you've targeted children with racial and personal attacks. That is unacceptable." The man's face flushed red. "I said nothing racial. I didn't touch them. You have no authority to— You are mistaken, Coleman interrupted, holding up the report in his hand. Your statements were witnessed and logged. You escalated a confrontation. The airline has already filed the report with security. You'll be escorted off this flight. There was no yelling, no shouting match. Just quiet, controlled power. Before the man could form another protest, 2 uniformed airport security officers stepped into the cabin behind the captain. They had already been called and briefed while Coleman was walking down the jet bridge. The man turned to the other passengers, hoping for support, some sign of agreement, some validation. He found none. Just silence, disgust, averted gazes. One man in the back of first class slowly began to clap. It was uncertain at first, a single pair of hands breaking the stillness. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the cabin echoed with applause. Not loud, not mocking, just a simple, unified show of agreement. The man in the suit stood up, cheeks burning, and allowed himself to be led out by security. His briefcase bumped awkwardly against his thigh as he tried to keep what little dignity he had left. As the door shut behind him, there was a strange stillness in the cabin. Not uncomfortable, but reflective, like everyone was trying to process what they had just witnessed. Coleman turned back toward the cockpit, nodding once at the flight attendant. Resume pre-departure checklist. Let's fly. As he passed the twins again, he paused for just a second. His eyes met theirs, and he gave a quiet nod. No words were needed. Marcus straightened in his seat. Malik exhaled slowly and leaned back, a smile of quiet pride forming on his lips. In the cockpit, Darius slipped into the left seat, placing his captain's hat on the dash and checking the flight plan. His co-pilot, a younger man who had been briefed over comms, sat beside him silently, still a little in awe. That was something, sir. Captain Coleman didn't look up. He clicked a few switches and responded calmly. Passengers deserve protection, especially the smallest ones. Meanwhile, in the cabin, the tension had lifted. The passengers began to settle again, whispering stories, speculating. One woman pulled out her phone and texted, "Our pilot just kicked a racist guy off the flight. His kids were the target." Unreal. As the engines roared to life and the plane began to taxi, Marcus peeked out the window. For the first time since boarding, he felt safe. Not because there was no danger, but because someone had stood up. Someone powerful. Someone who knew exactly what to say and when to say it. And that someone was their dad. When the flight finally landed hours later, the buzz had traveled ahead of them. People were already whispering at the destination terminal. Gate agents looked up from their screens. One even mouthed, "Is that the captain?" as the twins walked off the plane with him. Weeks passed, but the story didn't fade. In fact, it grew. The airline quietly recorded a reenactment, using the story, with permission, as part of its internal diversity and conduct training. The video closed with a simple message on screen: respect isn't assigned by class, it's earned by action, and dignity flies first class too. But for Marcus and Malik, no message meant more than what they had seen with their own eyes. When their father stepped through that cabin door, everything changed. Not just the flight, not just the tone, but how they saw themselves and what it meant to stand tall, no matter who tried to bring them down. Their father showed up in uniform. Now it's your turn. Subscribe if you stand for dignity and justice. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional, created to shed light on the destructive impact of racism and the power of standing up for what's right. Its purpose is to inspire conversations about equality, respect, and the importance of supporting one another in the face of adversity.